This episode of Wadadli Excellence is sponsored by the Tequila Sunrise Antigua B&B. Choose Tequila Sunrise for all your short-term and vacation rental needs. Tequila Sunrise, quality accommodations at an affordable price. What's up, Wadadli friends and family? Welcome back to the channel, and as usual, thank you for all your support. Welcome to another episode of Wadadli Excellence. Our guest tonight is being featured in our Academic Legends Showcase. So, from Tanner Street, St. John's, Antigua, our guest tonight can only be described as an academic and literary legend. He has published numerous books and articles across the fields of classics and French Caribbean literature. He is an alumnus of Harvard University and earned his PhD from the University of California at Berkeley. He has been on the faculty of many prestigious institutions, including Stanford University, Cornell, and NYU. He is now the professor of classics and comparative literature emeritus at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute honor and pleasure to welcome to the show Dr. N. Gregson Davis. Welcome to Wadadli TV.
Thank you for that introduction, and I'm flattered and honored to be here, and I'm happy to fill you in with any background information you need about my career.
The pleasure is all ours. So thank you for your time.
Very good.
Let me set the scene a little bit. I think maybe 10 years ago, I had read an article, which I guess at this point it probably wasn't correct, but it said there was a young man taken from Antigua at age 13 who was proficient in mathematics, so proficient in fact that he was taken directly to Princeton or Harvard or something like that. And I was like, wow, how is it that I've never heard of this person? We have a gifted, super smart young man that made that leap directly to the university, and no one's ever really celebrated that. So that's where I guess the beginning of this idea to have you on this show, once we got kind of serious with kind of track down our local heroes, so to speak. How much of that article is true? And set the record straight for us, please.
Yes, there's some inaccuracies
Okay.
in that portrait. Yeah, so first of all, I did my undergraduate work indeed at Harvard and my PhD at the University of California at Berkeley. No connection with Princeton at all. And my field was not mathematics, it was classics. My first degree was actually in classics, and in my second degree, my PhD was in comparative literature. And that's a vague expression, but in my case, what it came down to was the study of both Greek and Latin and French at the PhD level. So comparative literature allowed me to work in three literatures: ancient Greek, Latin, and French.
Wow. Was that, let me ask this question. Was that uncommon in Antigua at the time? That, to me, looking back now, we were an English-speaking country in the middle of like two other French countries and other Spanish neighbors, Greek and Latin and all this other stuff. How did that come to be? And so, I mean, to your level, pursuing that so far, how did that even come into the picture?
Yes, well, that's a very good question. So I was a student at the Antigua Grammar School. And at that time, the subjects that were taught included Latin and French. Those two languages were very much a very important part of the curriculum. And in my case, I was an overall very good student, including math, by the way. But I was a very good student. But I really did my best work in languages and in Latin in
Oh,
particular.
okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, and that was a standard sort of curriculum. We're talking about the 50s, and well, I left in 1956, so I
Oh,
started grammar school in 1950. So
okay.
talking about, let's say, the early 50s. That was the kind of those were the subjects that were most prominent. As for Greek, I didn't learn Greek. I didn't take classes in Greek officially until I was an undergraduate at Harvard. But my Latin teacher, who was the great legendary Alfred Blackett, uh,
Mm,
he was preparing me. He was my Latin teacher, of course, in sixth form, and I did very well with him under his tutelage. And he gave me private lessons in Greek. At one point, he said, "Well, I don't think there's much more I can teach you about Latin, so let's do some Greek." So we had we had private. I had private lessons from him in elementary Greek, and then when I went to college and majored in classics, I took classes in both languages. Yeah.
wow. What was the
The
difficulty?
French I didn't pursue as an undergraduate officially. I didn't take any classes in French. However, um, I developed an interest in French literature when I traveled in Europe the year after I graduated,
Hmm.
and um, and that's why I ended up doing my PhD in comparative literature, because I wanted to include the French literature. I'd become very enthusiastic, let's put it that way, about uh, the fact about the study of modern French literature, when I discovered that there were great French Caribbean authors
Oh, I see.
who needed to be in the canon, and whom I was eager to study. Yeah, so that's my linguistic background. But I don't want to close my story of my linguistic my education in languages without mentioning my mother, because the basis of my success in languages really is to be attributed to her early tutelage. My mother was a teacher in the elementary school, which was in our backyard in Antigua, and
Yes.
she taught me English grammar and syntax. She was a brilliant teacher and very, very knowledgeable in
Yes.
grammar.
So for our viewers, if the name sounds familiar, if the name Davis sounds familiar,
Ah, yes,
you want to tell the story? Tell the people who you are.
Davis.
The Davis name is quite
Well, you
synonymous.
mentioned Tanner Street, and
Yes.
the
Do
Davis
it.
family. We lived facing Country Pond,
Right.
and um, there were seven children to Oliver Davis,
Cookie.
father, otherwise look commonly commonly called Pookie,
Yeah.
um, and my mother Evelyn. She was actually Graham, and her maiden name was Graham, and she came from Barbados, specifically to marry my father, because they had
What?
met in Barbados when my father and mother were at teachers training college in Barbados. And they met there. My father came back, and he started a school. He was headmaster of a school in Liberta.
Hmm.
My mother Evelyn was also a teacher in Barbados. Anyway, they fell in love. He came back to Antigua, and after 5 years of correspondence, he proposed marriage, and she came to Antigua, and they had seven children.
Wow.
And in that house on Tanner Street, overlooking Country Pond, is where the seven children were born to Evelyn and Pookie.
Wow.
Uh, and that's the story of my immediate.
So the
So,
school now started in your living room. Is that true?
yes, no, the school is an interesting story in
Mhm.
itself. My aunt, Aunt Hilda, lived with us
Right.
at Tanner Street. And so she was, in effect, we like to say, a kind of a second mother. And she started an elementary school originally in our living room in Tanner Street. And then it expanded. When I was 4 years old, we the special school building and constructed in a backyard facing South Street, and that was where the foundation mixed school had moved after out of the living room and into the backyard. And the result of this is that I grew up, so to speak, in school, in and out of school. And in that school, my mother was a teacher. My father occasionally taught in the early days. And when I came along, he had given up teaching, but in the early days, apparently he was one of the teachers in the school. And my mother was a teacher in the school. So I was in and out of school.
School was your life.
So my entire life. I've
Nice.
known what education is, what our family focused on. All of the children, every single one, went on to college. And it was a little unusual in those days, but it's not unusual anymore. But we're talking about the early 50s. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Take me back to your days at the Antigua Grammar School.
Yeah.
How did Latin and the study of languages set you apart from the other students? What was the culture like at the Antigua Grammar School at the time in terms of persons being pervasive in languages? I know Latin is the basis for many languages. And
yes,
so
absolutely.
how did that
Okay,
experience
so historically, you can explain the first of all the fact that Latin was an important subject in the curriculum. You can explain it by considering the origins and the foundations of the secondary schools, like the Antigua Grammar School, which was set up by the British colonizers in various countries. So the purpose of these schools was to educate the sons and daughters of the plantocracy. They were not intended for ex-slaves, right?
Really?
Or slaves.
Yes.
They were intended so that people who owned the sugar plantations, who would normally go on to Oxford or Cambridge and then inherit these estates. That's the purpose. That was the aim of the Antigua Grammar Schools, to prepare the plantocrats for their role in society, right?
Wow.
And so the curriculum reflects that. And this is all over the British Empire, the same curriculum. You know, if you were in India, or if you were in, wherever the British had colonies, the exact same examination system and the curriculum was identical all over the British Empire.
Wow.
So
and that spoke to the fact that not very many
exactly
indigenous Antiguans, let's put it this way, were allowed to go to grammar school.
So I went back to the origins of these schools. But then, of course, after emancipation and so forth, education was opened up to the ex-slave population, right? And grammar school would admit students, who are not of the plantocracy, right? or their relatives and so on. So that's the way it started. And when I came along, you just had to pass an examination to secondary school, and you win a scholarship. And then, of course, later on, this was, became more of, they were more open to having all students, qualified students, admitted to grammar school. Although I'll tell you something interesting. My father, when he came along, previous generation, and he was interested in going to the grammar school, he was not allowed to take the exam because he was the child of an illegitimate child.
Yeah, that was the experience of my father.
What does that mean? I think I know what it means, but break it down. Was he the child of an owner?
No.
If your parents are not married, you're
okay.
illegitimate.
I see.
And illegitimate children were not admitted.
Allowed at grammar school.
Oh my goodness. Oh wow.
Those were the days.
They don't count. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Anyway.
Wow. We've come a long way, I think.
So, I learned that experience because one of my father's tutors, Reginald Sam,
Yes.
He had recommended my dad to go to grammar school,
Yes.
and they eventually allowed him to take botany as one of the classes at grammar school. But my uncles were at grammar school at the time. But I knew that in the 50s, very few people were allowed to. Grammar school was a select group of
Yes. Yes.
intelligent, cream of the crop of the local population. So,
Wow.
in
So
that vein, that's
yes.
why I'm asking, how was your experience at grammar school in terms of your social experience, beside
That's a
the
good
lack
question. Remember this, I was always 3 years younger than anyone else in the class.
of Craig can vouch for that.
No, I wasn't that
but
smart.
but at the same time, I was always coming first in the class every year.
Show
So
off.
I didn't have much discomfort when it came to academics. Socially, of course, people, I was teased a lot by the older students and that sort of thing. But I sat in the front row modestly and never stayed out
Oh,
of
you were that guy in the
yeah.
front
I was the
asking
guy
all
in
the
the front
questions.
row. Yes, that's the
That was me too. All right. So you're right. You're right. You're right. A little bit. So tell us, how does a 13-year-old, 15-year-old boy go from Tanner Street, Antigua to Harvard? How did that happen?
Good question. So let me start by saying that it was the correct age is 15,
15.
not 13.
Okay.
So I entered college at 15, graduated at 19. So the question is, how did that happen? Well, it's an interesting story, which tells you a little bit about the state of higher education and college education, opportunities for college education in Antigua.
In Antigua, yeah.
Yeah. So the Middle Reef Club, which I know is familiar to you and your listeners, and there's a community of wealthy Americans who have own homes, right? In its gated community, part of Antigua.
Yeah.
They initiated maybe in the late 40s, just before I came along, or perhaps early 50s. They initiated a program which was intended to help Antiguans who were interested in a college career, to help to cover their expenses and to award scholarships to promising young scholars so that they could attend university. Normally, of course, in those days, you attended university in the colonizing country, which is Britain, right? So if you were a good student, you would take the Cambridge School Certificate examinations,
Right.
and scholarships were available to those who came out at the top. The best students in that system went on usually to fairly prestigious universities in England, Oxford, Cambridge, Oxford, and so forth and so on. So I was being groomed for that by the year that I came up to study for the higher school certificate, and the challenge was that the person who was awarded scholarships had to be the college had to become first in the entire Leeward Islands in the higher school certificate examination.
Oh, wow.
So in sixth form, so I was in sixth form, and I was basically studying towards the higher school certificate with the hope of going on to college. Now, at this point, by coincidence, the head of the Middle Reef Trust Fund, as it was called in those days, scholarship fund, it's called the Trust Fund, was a famous American poet named Archibald MacLeish, who had an appointment at Harvard, and he was very keen to have best students who were sponsored with help from the Middle Reef go to an American university as opposed to a British university.
Right.
Yeah. And so he went to the Antigua Grammar School at the time when he thought, okay, I'll see if I can recruit a student here for Harvard. He went to the Antigua Grammar School and he spoke to the headmaster, whose name was Jack Foote. And he said to Jack Foote, as reported by my father, he went to Jack Foote and he said, "Who's your best student?" And the reply was NGG, which is the way in which the school teachers in those days referred to their students by the initials, their last
Yep.
name and the initials. And since there was more than one Davis at grammar school at the time, I was NGG and my father was OFG, right? Oliver Farquhar Davis.
Mhm.
So he said NGG. So McLeish was quite amused. And so he then went to the Antigua Girls High School because he wanted to have some, yes, to recruit also
Balance. Right.
to Radcliffe, which was, Radcliffe and Harvard at the time, were connected. And now
Know
they
that.
did a joint degree now. But anyway, so he went to the Girls High School and he said, "Who's your best student?" And the answer was Cecile Davis.
The whole family.
So I said, "Thank you." So he then arranged for us to take the SATs, the
Mhm.
examinations to college. And the idea was that if we did well on the SATs, and they would and then we were admitted to Harvard, he would then arrange, to have the Middle Reef
Scholarship.
contribute.
Yeah. Right.
So we both did very well, and at that point, I was told that you've been admitted to Harvard on a tuition scholarship, and I went to my Latin teacher because, of course, I didn't know much about anything about the university system in the United States. I had never heard of Harvard and Yale and all this stuff. And I was very, very young and inexperienced. And so I said to Dr. Blackett, he became doctor, by the way. He had a PhD after. After finished my degree, he did his PhD in London. He said to me, I said to him, Mr. Blackett, I just got admitted to Harvard College in the US, and what should I do? Because I was thinking, I was praying, I was hoping, had my sights set on Oxford or Cambridge. He said, "Oh, take it."
Yes, take that.
So there was a story. So I didn't actually complete the preparation for the high school certificate because I was admitted to Harvard. I would then have been in 6A. So I had not yet taken the exam, but I was admitted to Harvard and I left before I took the actual Cambridge exam.
Oh, I
But
see.
that was fine because I was able to enroll in classics to do a degree and which will build on my skills in Latin and so forth, and did very well. Won a bunch of prizes for Latin translation, including one as a freshman, and there was a prize that was awarded for Latin translation. Harvard had a wonderful competition, which involved setting a passage in English to be translated in Latin. Usually, the set piece was from a famous English author like Macaulay or one of these people, and the prize was open to anyone in the university. Especially, of course, it would be attractive to classics majors. Normally, it would be taken by seniors. The people would enter if they were seniors, having had 4 years of that. But I was fairly confident that I'd win the prize because
I didn't see you get from.
because I had very good, very, very, very good training by Blackett.
Yeah.
And Blackett himself was very pleased with the results of my efforts to translate English into Latin. That was my forte. So I signed up and entered as a freshman. Now, the way it was done was that this prize, you entered with a pseudonym, right? So you had the pseudonym, so nobody knew who
you were.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I chose a pseudonym in Latin, Novus Homo, which could be roughly translated upstart. Novus Homo.
Nice.
I got the passage.
Yeah.
And I did my best. I made a great and very careful effort to produce elegant prose, in the style of Cicero. And I thought, well, this is going to win the prize. And it sure enough did.
Right.
And then something very interesting happened. I was called in by my advisor, who was in charge of these competition. He said, "Well, he says, I have something very interesting to tell you. Your essay, your composition was the best.
Wow.
And normally it's given to a senior. So this year we will give 2 prizes."
Oh,
Oh boy.
oh,
They don't want to embarrass
To
me.
avoid embarrassment.
You let the freshmen do it? Yo, no, no.
Anyway, so cut a long story short,
Yeah.
it was an annual prize, and I won it 4 years in a row.
wow.
There goes that. Wow.
And
That's
then,
declaring,
and then to cap it all off, I was chosen to give the Latin oration at commencement.
Oh,
At the commencement exercise at Harvard, there was a tradition that there was a speech given by an undergraduate representing his class, right? And that speech was in Latin. So I had to compose and deliver the speech in Latin. And it's the first item on the commencement address. So this made some headlines. And one of the headlines was because the correspondent for Time Magazine, the education section of Time Magazine, was attending Harvard commencement, and he saw this young black student delivering a speech in Latin.
yeah.
And he thought it was an interesting item.
Scandalous.
So he interviewed my sister and myself on the steps of Widener Library. They made Time Magazine, 1960, June 1960.
wow.
Oh man, wow.
So it caused a bit of a sensation back in Antigua, of course.
Mission of this project is basically just to tell the stories of folks like yourself. A lot of really smart Antiguans out there doing great things, and they don't get a lot of publicity.
That's true.
Then we have a lot of up and coming superstars who are not getting the exposure that they need to get to the next level.
Yeah.
Our little project here, using 21st century technologies, is trying to help to bridge that gap. But say that to say, through all of your great successes, and I mean they are truly monumental. Have you been approached? Has anyone done a profile, a page, a series on you, and just kind of laid out your history and told your story? In Antigua, I mean.
Not in Antigua, no.
Wow. Oh, man.
We don't always highlight our own people. By the way,
Why is that?
I will congratulate your team, you in particular, and your team for this series. I think that's a great idea. And
thank you, sir.
You really and truly is something that you should. I know you will pursue because you're very enthusiastic, but it needs to be done. And I should say that you should make a point of carrying on with people who are not just great contributors to sport and so on, like Andy Roberts and people like that, and Viv Richards, right? Who definitely deserve this.
Yeah.
But you should. But I like what you're doing because you are looking also now at people who are in the humanities and literary study and so forth and so on. So, for example, Jamaica Kincaid is somebody that you definitely should speak to.
We will attempt. We've reached out to a number of people.
Okay. Well, she's a very fine writer, as you know, and has a great reputation.
Yeah. Put in a good word for us.
Well, if I can, if you've tried and failed, I might be able to.
We haven't reached out to her yet, but we will. Definitely. She's on the list. So I'm guessing, but you can tell me, kind of talk us through it. Being the underdog in every way, apparently, even at grammar school, how did that sort of prepare you for what you were going to encounter at Harvard in late 50s, early 60s, in the midst of all the the things happening in the US at the time? Let's just say it that way.
Okay, good. Well, I'll give you a proprietary anecdote, which relate to this. So when I was admitted to grammar school and scholarship, we were told that this particular year, they would not put all of the scholarship students directly into 2A. We're going to put everyone together in 2B, which was the other stream. They had A stream and B stream. Normally, they would have put scholarship students directly into 2A.
Mhm.
But they said, no, this year we're going to put everybody in 2B. And after 2 months or so, I can't remember the exact interval of time, we will promote the people who done well based on their performance to 2A, regardless of whether they're scholarship students or not. So idea was everybody goes into 2B.
2B.
After a few months, the people who are doing really well
2A.
up to 2A.
Gotcha.
So I thought, fine. So I went along and I got very good grades. In fact, I was the top student in that first 2 months in every subject, right? Okay.
Wow. Okay.
So then when time came for promotion, the headmaster of the school, Jack Foot, announced that the names, he called out the names of the people who would be promoted. Mine was not one.
Oh my goodness.
I was not promoted. So my father did not take kindly to this one at all. So he went to see Jack Foot.
Yes, with the cutlass.
And they said, well, he's young.
Mm.
Young. So my father really gave them
The business. Yeah.
Because only my father could.
Yeah.
And the next day when I went to school, I was told by the teacher, pick up your desk and take it to 2A.
2A. Yeah. Nice. Grammar school.
That's how things were in those
Yes.
days.
Yeah.
Anyway, so arriving at Harvard, so there were two issues really. The fact that I was very young, and so the question of social, adjustments and so on, and cultural adjustments as well, coming from Antigua. Was one, and the other thing was academics. Well, on the academic scene, I was pretty confident. I didn't have too much anxiety about that.
Good to go. Yeah.
Socially, it was interesting in that most of the students at Harvard in 1956, when I began, most of them were from very wealthy, white, upper class Americans, right? And some very aristocratic families from various countries in the world, like the Aga Khan and people like that, and then they had like Michael Rockefeller and all this stuff. There were only half a dozen students of color at Harvard in 1956.
I can imagine.
There was a Haitian.
Mm-hmm.
There was a Nigerian, a Kenyan, a Haitian, only two African Americans. 1956. An entire entering class of about, I don't know, I can't remember, maybe 1,200 students.
I wonder how far off of desegregation this was in what's 56 you said?
Yeah, so 56. So when I arrived, it was the beginning, not the beginning, but perhaps close to the beginning of the civil rights.
Oh, yeah.
And while I was in college, we kept getting these reports on the South and on the sit-ins.
Yes.
And that was all. It wasn't much discussed on the university campus.
I wonder why.
But but that's the story. And of course, everything, by the time I went to graduate school in the 60s, the civil rights movement was in full force. And when I was a graduate student, I have to tell you, I spent more time on the barricades and in demonstrations than in the classroom.
Wow.
I was a TA at Berkeley in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
And Berkeley had become the center for student agitation on our organization. And I was a very, 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 very intense participant and eager participant in the movement. The year that I arrived, and the year that I'm being a TA in Latin as part of my doctoral program, there's how can I put it? This explosion of student involvement in politics on the university campus of the United States. This is completely new to the U.S. Students before the 50s, before the 60s, they went to school in order to just do their degree. They stayed out of politics. European students, on the other hand, had a long tradition of involvement in politics. In American students. But I don't tell you the whole story. It would take hours and hours to explain. But a lot of students got involved in going to the South and helping to organize the Black vote. You know, you've heard of SNCC and CORE and these
Yes,
things.
yes, yes.
So those students, when they came back to campus, said, wait a minute, the university itself has problems. You know, we don't have to go to the South for these problems. They're right here on campus.
Right.
And at the time, we had a very right-wing governor of California. And when the demonstrations started, the right-wing Republican governor and others decided that Berkeley was a hotbed of communism and trouble. So they they decided to take away the rights of students to organize on campus because by tradition, students set up tables at the entrance to the university campus, and they would various groups would solicit membership, you know, and to the freshmen.
Oh, okay.
And they thought that demonstrations had been organized there, and some of these demonstrations were having an impact on the political scene in California at the time. And so they banned that the regents of the University of California banned and these tables, these organizing tables. So there was a huge reaction on the part of the students.
Wow.
People were indignant, and one student refused to move when they were asked to clear the desks away.
Yeah.
He sat at his desk, and the police came on the campus to arrest him. They surrounded the table, and students crowded around the table.
Yeah.
And this police car was stuck with the student inside the car. And they left it there. These were the days when police and students, the campus was considered sort of sacred, and police didn't get involved in university campuses, you know? So this is unusual and very, really special. So the police car was surrounded, couldn't move. They left it there, and students got on top of the police car and made speeches. And this went on for 3 days.
Oh my goodness.
And we had folk singers like Joan Baez and so on.
Yeah.
And people were making speeches on top of the police car about free speech, because this was a violation of free speech, right? That's what free speech movement. So free speech movement. So anyway, eventually they hauled this Mr. Weinberg away. And those of us who had been involved in the protest, many of us were graduate students and TAs and so on. We decided that our reaction was going to put the university on strike. So all of the graduate students who were supposed to be teaching these classes, we went on strike. And then there was the first sit-in in a major American university was a Sproul Hall in Berkeley, and over 600 students invaded the administration building.
Right about that.
We brought our sleeping bags. I was there. And that was great. The Sproul Hall sit-in. And about halfway through the first day, well, we sat for one whole day, and then during the evening, the leaders, so to speak, of the group, the spokespersons of the group, said to us, we have it on good authority that the police are actually going to come and arrest us. Yeah. Arrest everybody in Sproul Hall. Okay. So if you are a minor or a foreign student with a visa, we really advise you to leave the building. Yeah. So I left the building along with some people in that category. Just a few minutes before the police arrived. So the largest mass arrest in U.S. history, over 600 students. And they did what was being done because they imitated the style of protest of the civil rights movement. So they went limp and so on and so on. And we shall overcome, you know, all that stuff. Because this whole free speech movement was modeled on the civil rights movement. Wow. Anyway, so the university, they arrested everyone. We went on strike and then negotiated. So free speech issue.
Kudos to you, sir.
Well,
thank you for your sacrifice and for your bravery to make it easier for us to go to higher learning, although some of us choose not to, but that's another story. But
Yeah,
also because as I understand it, that Black studies as a discipline itself came out of these type of activities.
exactly.
Is that
Yeah.
okay? Wow. Congratulations. Thank you so much, sir. We appreciate it.
It was very, I felt very fortunate to have been that historical moment, to be present and be able to participate, because
Wow.
it was in the
First-hand
stirring
account.
times. Berkeley was a mecca for progressive thinking
Yeah.
and so forth, as you know. The Black Panther Party had started in Oakland,
Yes.
down the street, and there were demonstrations every week practically in Berkeley.
Did you meet Stokely? Did you ever
Oh
met
yeah,
Andrew?
I met
You
all of
did?
those people. Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah,
man.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
What a life,
they
man.
were frequent visitors to the Berkeley campus.
You've been
Yeah,
successful in
yeah.
being seen and being recognized and those kinds of studies. But at the time, during the genesis of this and marching and protesting for certain kinds of rights and abilities, did you waver? Did you doubt? Like, take me through the night that Martin Luther, oh, I guess the day that Martin Luther King got assassinated.
Well, I didn't doubt that this movement was going to have some success, because the reaction to it on the part of white Southerners in particular, but also large numbers of the white population um, in the United States, was certainly mixed and in some cases hostile. So, but there was a movement, there was a sense of euphoria on the part of students. We felt that we were going to change things. This whole generation, we felt, okay, America has not lived up to its promises, and we're going to support the King movement, and we're going to support all these other movements for social change. But we also had a kind of confidence that in America would never be the same. We really untruly thought that we had turned the corner, and that's when you saw these massive demonstrations. And when King was assassinated, I remember just walking on the campus, and everybody was in shock. Everybody was in shock.
Wow.
But one thing that happened that it mobilized people of all races to really face the issues in American society of inequality in American society, and try to bring about change at the federal level, and in the laws and so forth. And that's when you had all the movements to have civil rights implemented in various ways. Yeah.
That's very powerful.
Yeah.
Talk about your love for the humanities.
What's that?
Talk about your love for the humanities. As a young student in Antigua, who were the Caribbean thespians at the time, at your time, that were prominent?
Well, okay. So remember, Antigua Grammar School has English literature on its curriculum, but nothing about the Caribbean, nothing but English literature. And English literature, the canon included, the great English writers, you can, Chaucer, Shakespeare, the Romantic poets, Byron, Shelley, and all that stuff. And we studied those in preparation for the examination. So we had very, very good immersion in the strictly English literature. I discovered Caribbean literature afterwards. I didn't even realize when I was going to school that there was a Caribbean literature, right? Because at the time, there were a few poets and novelists who had been published in England, right? Because that's where Caribbean literature was being published, right? Not in the territories, but in England. And so a generation of writers that included the V.S. Naipaul, Eric Walcott, and these great names, George Lamming, they were writing and publishing in England, and every now and again, we in the Caribbean would become aware of this, because BBC had a special program Calling the Caribbean, which was directed at the educated public in the Caribbean, and they would interview writers like Naipaul and George Lamming and so on. And so when I came back to teach in Antigua, right, as I mentioned before,
Right.
and teaching Latin and Greek, I said, I'm going to introduce Caribbean literature to Antiguan people. And so I had a radio program. Ephraim John was the head of the Antigua Broadcasting Service at the time. He is a good friend of the family, and he allowed me to. He put me on on the air, and I ran this program on Caribbean literature, and I'd read excerpts from all the great Caribbean writers, George Lamming, yes, Naipaul, and all these people. Nice. And then at grammar school, I thought, we need to become culturally active and so forth, especially, and so and also we need to get contact with the literature in a different way than simply sitting down in the classroom and memorizing things and writing them down. There should be a more active, approach to teaching the culture. So I started the association, drama association at the grammar school. Okay. And we produced mostly. We didn't have any Caribbean plays at the time that I put on in that first year, but we had bits. We had excerpts from Shakespeare and things like that. Yeah, and one of my students, Tim Hector.
Tim Hector.
I remember him playing Macbeth.
Wow.
in one of our productions. Yeah.
And Mr. Edison Bunting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So those are the days.
Wow. So
now is accepted.
Yes. Now it's it.
Yeah.
Keep going through the career after Berkeley and your successes there.
Okay, so while I was finishing my PhD, before I'd actually taken my oral examination, and I was preparing for my oral PhD examination, I got a phone call from the chair of the classics department at Stanford. Now, this is another case of I've never actually applied for a job. I've always been recruited. Right? So I'm sitting there in my Berkeley apartment, and I'm cramming for my PhD orals, right? Having finished the written part. I get a phone call from Brooks Otis. Now, Brooks Otis was a classicist who was trained at Harvard, and he had just been appointed a year or two before chair of the classics department at Stanford. And I'd met him casually on the Berkeley campus because one day I was walking across campus, and the chair of my department of Comp Lit, whose name was Alain Renoir, a Frenchman, he saw me and he said, he waved at me, said, come on over. I wanted to meet Brooks Otis. And so he introduced me to Brooks Otis, and he started singing my praises and so forth. But I did, there I was. Anyway, that happened. And I was happy to meet Brooks Otis because he was one of the leading Latinists in the country at the time, So that was it. But here I am now, go back to my story. I'm sitting in my room and I'm going through flashcards and memorizing dates and so forth and so on. And I get a phone call from Brooks Otis. This is Brooks Otis. Would you like to teach at Stanford? Just like that. So I took a deep breath instead of, yeah, I guess.
Yes, I will. Yes, I'll take that.
He says, one of our professors died suddenly when we're leading a group of students in Italy, and we need somebody to teach next semester. We need you right away to start teaching next semester. So I said, fine. Okay. Anyway, I did the orals well enough, passed very well. And then he invited me down to the Stanford campus to meet the faculty in classics. Now, in those days, there wasn't, they didn't have to do a national search. This was all done,
paper.
chairman just did it, and it was very, very informal.
Mhm.
He phoned up some people at Harvard and said, they
Who's this
thought
guy?
Gregson Davis is probably a good choice or something like that. And so he said, well, I will start teaching. So then he took me aside and he introduced me because he hadn't even told the rest of the department that he had hired me. I mean, he just announced it. Those are the
Wow.
days. And there was no national search or anything like that.
Right.
Anyway, he took me aside and he said, um, we have a lot of Princeton people on this faculty. It's nice to have another Harvard person. So it's an old boys network kind of situation.
Oh yes,
That's how I got hired at Stanford. My first job.
nice.
Wow.
Now, at that point, now can you just name your price? You asking
Well,
me?
in those days, I didn't even think about money, or I was,
Oh
it was
man,
it was not. It just seemed very natural.
you just love the work. Okay,
I wasn't even thinking about job market yet because I hadn't yet
finish the PhD. Okay,
It was
okay,
a completely different setup in those days. Yeah.
yeah,
Anyway, so
wow.
I was hired to teach classics, and first as an acting assistant professor. When I got the degree, formally, when I received the degree, then they would change it from acting assistant to assistant, a tenure track. So the first year that I taught at Stanford, um, I was still writing my dissertation. Okay,
Oh, okay.
I handed in the dissertation, and then they promoted me to tenure there. And then that same year, Stanford also decided to start a complete degree program. Uh, so they were, and the chair of the chair of the department, the professor who was setting up the program, just as at Berkeley a few years before, that chair said to me, "I want you to make you a joint appointment in complete and classics." So I was the assistant professor in classics and comparative literature, the joint appointment. And I've always had joint appointments since then. So that was my first job, which I spent over 20 years at Stanford. I studied publishing and all this stuff, tenure, so forth, up the chain. And then in 89, um, I I moved from Stanford to Cornell. So
Upstate
the
New
main
York.
reason was that Silicon Valley had come along and things were exploding. The job market was the real estate scene was terrible. Prices were going up in like 10, 15%, a year. And I was not able, here I was a full professor, but not being able to afford a house, right? Because every time I looked at the house prices, it was like receding into the distance, right? And I had room and board provided by the university because I was a resident fellow, which is a faculty member who lived like a dorm parent with the students. And I thought this is a good way to build up some equity. Well, after a while, I realized this was not going to happen. So I thought, I should live somewhere where I can afford, you know. And so I I just let it be known at one of these classics meetings that I think of leaving Stanford, and I got about 3 or 4 offers off the bat. So I chose Cornell.
Now
That's
Cornell is that upstate.
yeah, upstate
Yeah.
New York.
Okay. Got
Yeah, Ivy League, very good school, very good
Yes.
classics department. So I did 5 years there,
Yeah.
and there's I was granted an endowed chair, and I also served as chair of both. I was chair of classics for a year, and then chair of complit for a couple more years, and then I was called in by to do some administration as uh, associate dean of humanities at Cornell. Yeah, and so that was a good experience. But then my wife and I got tired of the weather in
The
upstate
cold,
New
upstate New York.
So I
The
sort of let
mush.
it be known that we were tired of the weather,
Yeah.
and I got an offer from Duke,
There you go.
who were then looking to, you know, make up for the lost time, because Duke Southern University,
Hey,
until
careful.
the 60s, they had very, very few black students, let alone black faculty.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So they were very happy to make me an offer. And we were very happy to leave the ice and the snow of Ithaca,
Yeah.
although I loved Ithaca for many reasons.
Yeah, yeah,
So in 1994, I took up the appointment at Duke, and I've
right.
been there from until I retired 2 years ago, with a short period of time where I taught at NYU for 2 years.
Gotcha. So you are now let's see,
Emeritus.
professor of classics and comparative literature emeritus. What does that mean, sir?
Oh, it was when you're retired. When
Yeah.
you retire and you've done good service, there's a
I'm
kind of
asking for a friend.
emeritus means that you've had distinguished service and you're now retired. And in other words, you can retire, but you don't necessarily become emeritus. That's sort of a title that's awarded to someone who's done good work, has
Gotcha.
served the university well. So it's called emeritus, masculine, emerita, feminine.
I mean,
And if you know your Latin, emeriti, plural. So I am yes, Professor Emeritus.
through all of these great appointments and positions and so on, you're still, a little black boy from Antigua. Has that ever crossed your mind when you step into some of these big boardrooms and stages with thousands of people listening to you? Do you ever like, oh my God, what am I doing here?
Well, the thing is that I've always felt comfortable in academic settings.
Hmm.
And my father was very good at making us understand that just be good at what you do. And he taught us that we are as good as anybody and
Everybody.
other
There
human
we go.
beings.
Love
And
it.
regardless of race or where you're from or anything else. So I had disadvantage, that I never really I've never really been intimidated by my academic peers, right?
Mhm.
And so that was not a moment that did not cause me great anxiety. But I did get involved a little bit in making sure that um, that uh, minorities and so on, students of minorities and professors who are minority, or that is black or indigenous, Indian, indigenous American, that these folks would get their opportunities, right?
Right.
And because we all know that that the exclusions that took place, vis-a-vis minorities, even his Jews and other
Yeah.
non-Anglo-Saxon Protestant populations. So I wouldn't say that I was very, very active, but I certainly supported Black Studies when I was dean, and certainly I was very, very. I made contributions, which nothing spectacular, but I certainly was consulted a lot by administrators and so on, and those served on various committees and so forth to
Gotcha.
bring about these changes. And Duke has done very, very well, by the way. Duke has made great strides from the days when they had no black students to now a large number of faculty, black faculty, and this kind of thing. And so you see some great changes, and it's happening also at the administrative level. So we're in the forefront. And you notice that my my alma mater, old undergraduate alma mater, Harvard, has come through big time. Did you see that?
Yes. You have a
The
black president.
black woman who is now president of Harvard. This is inconceivable.
Wow.
When I think about my years at Harvard in the 50s, and this was just not in the foreseeable future, but there it is. Harvard has a black female. I think her family is originally from Haiti.
Yeah,
Oh,
she's
wow.
here.
Yeah, yeah,
Congratulations to them.
yeah. I'm really impressed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Harvard, by the way, is definitely on board with the idea that the university profited from slavery. And you may have
Yes.
heard the stories about Harvard Law School and the Antigua connection.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know,
I
yeah,
read about that last year that
plantation owners who
yeah, what do they have? Some sort of
teach in the law school. Yeah,
yeah,
this
that they
is
had actual
yeah,
property there and
yeah,
slaves and so on, and
yeah,
the profits and
plantation.
the proceeds
Yeah, the
of the
Harvard Law School was founded in the profits of the slave trade in Antigua.
yes,
So that's an area where we can work on here
definitely,
for some
definitely,
reparations.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We actually talked with probably one of your, maybe he came along after you,
Mhm.
a gentleman by the name of Dorbreen Omar.
Dorbreen, yes, yes,
Yeah, is
yes.
he a contemporary of you?
Well, he was my brother Edgar, who died recently.
Mhm.
They were so Edgar was a few years younger than I, but he was at the grammar school. When I taught that year at the grammar school,
Yeah.
Edgar was one of my students in 6B.
Okay.
There in that class I was teaching, and that would be Dobbin's
Theater.
generation. Yeah.
I see. I see.
And I'm very happy to see how Darwin has gone on with the theater, writing plays,
Yeah.
getting involved in
What
literary
a
work.
guy. What a guy.
He's really a great example.
And he's making the he's leading the charge, at least in
He's leading the
Antigua,
charge. Yeah.
on the
And the
reparations.
reparations, exactly. Yeah. But I
Yeah.
was very happy to see his attempts to create a theater, an Antiguan theater, sort of a little bit like on the model of Derek Walcott's attempts to start a theater in Trinidad, right? Theater workshop in Trinidad,
Right.
and compose original plays and so on, involving use of Creole languages and so forth.
More things and we'll let you go. What is your message to the young people, right? The next Gregson, the next upstart Antiguan that wants to go places in life. Talk about hard work, work ethic, and not being intimidated.
Well, those are sort of the obvious things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think that what I can pass on is what my parents passed on to me, which is a very, very strong message that the way forward in terms of the kind of quality of life and contribution to society and so on, the way forward is to focus on education as a means of development and of progress. And this is very important. It implies even the people who think that they're going to go into politics. What we need today are people who are in positions of power who are actually well educated. There's a lot of talk about the people this and the people that, but you can't run a state like Antigua, a country like Antigua, if you're not thoroughly well, thoroughly educated. And it sounds like elitism, but elitism, I'm sorry to say, it's something that we're going to need because the world is highly complex.
Major challenges.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if
Yeah.
you don't do that, you will get what's happening in a lot of countries that are ex colonies or
Falling apart.
independent. Yeah, a lot of these states are just being pushed around by the former colonial countries. This way, and we need to get rid of it. No, a great example though, and I want to hold up Barbados, and Prime Minister Motley. She is the kind of person we need everywhere in the Caribbean. She is brilliant. She's articulate. I mean, she is
No
very, very,
pushover.
yes, yeah. And
Yeah.
this is happening in Barbados. So I point to her proudly whenever I talk to my American friends.
Right. So we're gonna wrap up, but before we do, we have some rapid fire questions
Yes.
to help people. We talked a lot about all the academics and so on, but we want to
Yeah.
add a little bit more of a personal touch uh, to the interview. So we
Mhm.
have a couple of rapid fire questions that
Sure. Sure.
we will ask. We'll skip that one.
Mhm.
Rank 1, 2, and 3. We have short shirt, swallow, and obstinate. How would you rank?
Oh, short shirt. No question about
He's
that.
one. Okay, who's two?
Okay, short shirt,
Yeah.
swallow, obstinate.
Okay. Wow. It's an obstinate fan right here.
Oh, that's this is not to say that these people
No,
aren't good. It's just,
I,
It's your personal preference.
yeah, yeah,
It's subjective.
yeah.
Let's see. Were you a Michael Jackson or a Prince fan?
Well, more Jackson than Prince.
More Jackson than
You
Prince.
see, but that generation is when I was an adolescent and when I was listening to a lot of popular music, it's before the Prince era, you know.
Oh,
So
I see. I see.
I am, you know, Aretha Franklin and
Yeah.
Tina Turner and
There
that's
you go. Gotcha.
that generation.
On that note, though, let's go back. What's your favorite short shirt song?
Oh my God! Nobody go run me
Me.
where we come from.
That's right. The champion of short shirts.
The unofficial
Epitaphs.
Antigua anthem.
Oh yeah.
All right. Let's see. Let's go into your foods. Maybe you're not a fast food eating man, but
No, I
is
don't
it
do
the
fast.
Big Mac or Whopper?
No, I don't do fast
You
food.
don't do fast food.
I don't
Good
know.
for
I
you.
don't want to sound like a snob, but my family are all great cooks. My wife is a fabulous cook, but we're
Mhm.
very cosmopolitan in our approach to food. But
Okay.
but fast foods has never been my thing.
Gotcha.
As Antiguan foods go, you have
Oh,
to
well, you name it. Sauce, pepper pot and fungi.
Oh
That's
my
right.
goodness. Nice.
You know,
Yeah.
I've always had an enigma, sort of a tie-up in terms of what is a national dish. Some people say fungi and saltfish. Some people say dukkha and salt. What's your take on
Okay, so this so-called saltfish breakfast, yeah. Well, I would say the fungi and pepper pot. Pepper
Mm.
pot and fungi.
I think
No,
my mother would agree
what
with
we
that.
do though in our household is my wife Daphne, she likes to do the Sunday breakfast, Antigua Sunday breakfast with saltfish and Johnny cakes, you know.
What?
Yeah,
What time is breakfast again?
Oh, he's a very fine cook.
We're
Very
coming, right? We're going. We're going
fabulous.
for breakfast. There you go.
Fun chicken cook.
Yeah. Favorite book?
Favorite book? That's
I
a
know. Tough one, right? Yeah.
I don't know if I have a single favorite book. Let me just say this. You know that poetry is my love, right? So that's
Yeah.
we talk
Clearly.
about favorite English poet, my favorite Caribbean poet, you know, that's all. My favorite English poet is John Keats, which goes back to my school days. My favorite West Indian poet is Derek Walcott. And the second, well, I would say Derek Walcott, whom I got to know very well, by the way, and even tried to hire him at Duke when I was dean. But he's a very great poet, and really deserves that Nobel Prize.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Any movies?
Not a very big movie fan.
Okay. Gotcha. So you're a superstar, at least in my eyes. But
Thank you.
can you share a celebrity encounter? Or are you not really phased by, well, who are you phased by? And tell
I'm
us
not
that story.
phased by that, but I did enjoy. I just mentioned Derek Walcott. I think
Yeah.
the people that, well, the two people that have written whose work I've studied and published on, and whom I had a thrill when I met were Aimé Césaire, who I mentioned before, who was in Martinique, and he was a prominent politician and a poet. And I wrote a book on him, and I visited him in Martinique and in Paris several times, and that was a very important,
Gotcha.
change for me. The other one was Derek Walcott, whom I had invited several times when I was in various universities to come and read his poetry and so forth. And I tried to hire him, and then in his later years, we got to be good friends, and I would visit him, and stay at this place, and meeting him was a very important and meaningful encounter for me. Yeah.
How about the music genre? You strike me as maybe a jazz guy.
Well,
Am I getting that?
well, I mean, I'm pretty eclectic, but I'll be really honest with you though. When I was growing up in Antigua,
Mhm.
I was taught classical piano, right? The
Oh,
classical repertoire. So the headmistress of the Antigua Girls High School was an Englishwoman named Winifred Wainwright, and she taught me piano. And I took a lot of those exams with the Royal Academy of Music exams and did quite well there. And I still keep my piano repertoire going. I practice still nowadays. That said, even though I was trained as a classical pianist, I love you mentioned jazz. I would say I don't know what I would say. The kind of music, black music that came out. With that I mentioned, Aretha Franklin and people of that ilk.
soul.
Soul music,
Yeah.
uh, and calypso, of course. Calypso. The great Sparrow. You didn't mention Mighty Sparrow because you're focusing on Antiguan Calypsonians,
Right.
but I have all the records that Sparrow made.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a total, almost complete collection, except maybe for the last 5 years or so when he stopped playing in the competitions for Calypso King. So
Yeah.
I'm a great admirer of Caribbean music, steel band music.
Right.
There on Cannon Street, South Street, we're Boot Force fans,
Oh yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
and I have
Right.
collections of their early recordings that the Boot Force made, and I admire that music very, very much.
Look at that. Wow. Wow. So what do you put on to like relax at the house? Beautiful study you have there. What do you
Yeah,
just put on and kick back and just vibe
well,
out?
as I mentioned before, I will play classical music and then
Yeah.
disperse it with music from other countries and other cultures, like Indian music, like Ravi Shankar and that sort of thing. And then occasionally, for example, I just dug up my old LP because I still use the discs
Oh
of Tina Turner because there's a recent musical that's made
yes.
in Korea, which
Yeah.
F and I saw. So I dusted off my old Tina Turner album.
Oh,
And
you
so,
mean the big one, the big 12-inch record
yeah,
with the
yeah,
needle?
yeah.
Fine, fine, fine.
So what happens is the time I listen to music most is when I'm exercising in the morning. I've been doing daily exercises since age 20 something, and
Oh,
mostly yoga and
oh, okay.
some Tai Chi. And
Nice.
Mm.
I turn on music. A lot of times it's classical music, but
Yeah,
I will turn on also Ravi Shankar.
that explains it.
Yeah,
Man, you look fabulous.
it's all because of yoga.
Excellent.
Okay,
Wow, this
yeah.
has been quite a treat, Mr. Davis. What can I say? Thank you for coming on the show.
Well, I enjoyed it.
Congratulations on all of your accomplishments.
Well,
Uh,
thanks again,
what
and
a life.
don't forget Jamaica Kincaid.
Oh, definitely. We will reach out to all of our heroes and hopefully with a little, we'll just name drop. Say Gregson was on, so you feel comfortable. Come on. So
And
hopefully that actually works.
I hope it works. Okay, thanks again.
Jomo?
Thank you for your contribution to the um, intelligentsia of Caribbean life.
Ooh, big word.
Yeah,
Intelligent.
I practiced that one like 3 weeks.
You feel good? You all right?
Yeah, having a headache. And but seriously, I want to commend you as one of the forebearers of our humanities and
Mhm.
studies of literary art and just being an academic um, person. I think there need to be more academic heroes in our society,
Yeah.
and I think that we need to
Yes.
sing the praises of those who have dedicated their lives to learning and to the education of others. And your family has certainly been stalwart
Yes,
in
definitely.
Antiguan society.
Yeah.
So I want to commend you for continuing that legacy, and I want to congratulate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on this program, and I hope to be in touch with you sometime in the future, maybe. Yeah.
Hopefully we can actually meet in person. That would be
Yes.
quite the honor. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you.
Talking about Wadadli. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.